Hello everyone, welcome to CEC online lectures. This is Dr. Nupur Agarwal from Shahid Bhagat Singh College, University of Delhi. So I'll be discussing on the factors affecting compensation today, and in this the agenda of my lecture is we'll be talking on internal factors and external factors which affect compensation decision of the organization. The external factors affects compensation decision such as labor market condition, cost of living, prevailing wage levels, government control, labor unions, labor legislation, globalization, cross-sector mobility, and internal factors which I'll be discussing in this lecture, like compensation policy of the organization, worth of a job, an employee's worth, the organizational ability to pay, employees related factors, and business strategy. So before I discuss about these factors, let us recapitulate the very meaning of compensation, which we have already discussed in the previous lectures. But to tell you again here, what does compensation mean? So compensation includes wages, salary, benefits, allowances paid in cash or in kind or both, which the employer pays to the employees. So employees provide their services to business. They devote their time, energy, skills, knowledge to the organization. In consideration of this devotion of employees, employer gives compensation to the employees. So compensation is very important issue in human resource management, and it affects the relationship between the management and workers. Compensation is also one of the biggest reason of dispute between employers and employees. Hence, it is very crucial to design a compensation program, and one should know that what are the factors which affects the compensation decision while designing the compensation program to make it effective. So the factors which affect employees' compensation is broadly categorized into internal factors and external factors. So there are n number of internal and external factors, but the majorly which affects employees' decision. So I'll be discussing the external factors. Number one is the labor market condition. Second will be the cost of living, employees. Now this next will be the prevailing wage level, the government control, the labor union, the labor legislation, the globalization, the cross-sector mobility. So these few we'll be looking today in this lecture. So let us take one by one. External factors which affects the compensation or which affects the compensation decision in the organization. Let us talk about labor market conditions. This is one of the external determinants of compensation, and it affects the compensation decision. And this organization has to take into consideration these labor market conditions. Into this, let us discuss the force of demand and supply, that how it affects the compensation decision. So the force of demand and supply of human resources no doubt play a very important role in compensation decision. Employees with rare skill sets and expertise gain higher wages and salary than the one with ordinary skill abundantly available in the job market. But it is also said that the higher supply of human resources for certain jobs may not lead to reduction of wages beyond a floor level due to government prescription of minimum wage levels and due to employee unions bargaining strength. So we know that the higher supply of human resource for certain jobs sometimes may not lead to the reduction of wage beyond the floor level due to government prescriptions. So these two strength or these two tools are working together, the government prescription of minimum wage level as well as the union bargaining strength. And this is how the compensation decides in the market. Similarly, this factor by itself does not result in lower pay if the vast majority of available resources are unemployable due to poor skill and low talent. Thus, it is clear that law of demand and supply applies to labor market only to a limited extent. If we again say the labor market condition, we have to also consider or look into the going rate of pay. What is this? The going rate of pay is another labor related factor influencing employees' remuneration. Going rates are basically those that are paid by different units of an industry in a locality and by comparable unit of the same industry located elsewhere. So this is the only way of fixing salary and wage in the initial stage of plant operations. Subsequently, a comparison of a going rates would be highly useful in resolving wage related disputes. So this is also one of the factor in labor market condition, and the next is the productivity of labor should also be taken care by the organization while taking decision on the compensation. That productivity of labor also influences wage fixation. Productivity can arise due to increased effort of the worker or as a result of the factors beyond the control of the workers, such as improved technology, sophisticated machine and equipment, better management, and the like. Productivity arising from advanced technology and more efficient method of production will influence wage fixation, while productivity can be measured in terms of any one of the several factors such as capital equipment, material, fuel and labor. What matter most is the labor productivity. So it is the relationship between the input of labor measured in man hours and the output of the entire economy or of a particular industry or plant measured in terms of money or in a physical terms. So it may be stated that productivity has only subordinate role in wage fixation. It can at best help determine fair wages. So though the productivity linked wages may help utilize human resources better, this is particularly relevant to our country where productivity is very low. However, the argument that productivity would increase if it is linked to remuneration is hardly acceptable to labor and labor organization. So this productivity related issues and of productivity of labor, going rate of pay, and the forces of demand and supplies are the labor market conditions which are the factors and which affects the compensation decision of the organization. Next, we'll be talking about the external factor, that is the economy. What economic conditions or the situation plays role or how it affects the compensation decision. The economy definitely affects financial compensation decision. For an example, if we say that a depressed economy generally increases the labor supply and lowers the market rate. On the other hand, a booming economy results in higher competition for workers and price of labor is driven upward. So while it is possible for some organization to thrive in a recession, there is no question that the economy does not affect remuneration decisions. So in most cases, the cost of living will rise in an expanding economy. Since the cost of living is commonly used as a pay standard, the economy's health exerts a major impact upon pay decisions. So labor union, the government and the society are all less likely to press for pay increases in a depressed economy. So the economy is one of the determinant and which actually affects the compensation decision of the organization. Next, we'll be discussing in the external factors, that is prevailing wage levels. This prevailing wage level or the prevailing wage rate is also known as company wage or going wage rate. This criterion is most popular, and in this the compensation paid by organization depends on compensation paid by the organization of same industry. So this criterion is widely used because by using it competition can be avoided, trade unions accept this method, and employees also remain satisfied. So if the firm pays higher compensation as compared to other firms, then a wage war will start, which will be detrimental for all firms. On the other hand, if firm pays less compensation as compared to other firms, then it will not be able to attract or retain employees. So most of the organization fix their pay in keeping with the level for similar jobs in the industry. They frequently conduct wage survey and accordingly seek to keep their wage level for different jobs. So in this series, the next point will be discussing on the government control, that how government control as an external factor affects the compensation decision in the organization. So government through various legislative enactments have a bearing on compensation decision. We have a plethora of labor laws in our country, and the labor laws at the central as well as at the state levels. Some of the central laws which have a bearing on the employees' remuneration are the Payment of Wages Act 1936, the Minimum Wages Act 1948, the Payment of Bonus Act, the Equal Remuneration Act, and the Payment of Gratuity Act. If we take these acts one by one, what is the Payment of Wages Act? It was passed to regulate payment of wages to certain classes of person employed in the industry. It also seeks to protect workers against irregularities in payment of wages and unauthorized deduction by the employers. So when we discuss on what is the Minimum Wages Act, it enables the central and the state governments to fix minimum rates of wages payable to employees in sweated industries. The Payment of Bonus Act provides for payment of a specified rate of bonus to employees in certain establishment, whereas the Gratuity Act provides for payment of gratuity to employees after they attain superannuation. There is another enactment, the Equal Remuneration Act provides for payment of equal remuneration to men and women workers for same or similar work. So these acts stipulated stringent punishment also for contravention of its provision. Therefore, firms have to decide on salaries and wages in the light of these relevant acts, and they cannot go beyond these acts. So these government rules and the government control also affects the pricing decision of labor in the industry. Let us now discuss on the cost of living, the next point under external factors which affects this compensation decision. What is this cost of living? As we know, that increase in the cost of living raise the cost of goods and services. It varies from area to area within a country and from country to country. The changes in compensation are based on Consumer Prices Index, CPI, which measures the average change in the price of basic necessities like food, clothing, fuel, medical services over a period of time. So the compensation is related to price level and varies with variation in price level. Increase in price level should be followed by increase in compensation. Logically, compensation should decrease with the decrease in price level, but it doesn't happen usually. So the criterion matters during period of rising prices and is forgotten when prices are stable or falling. This justification for cost of living as a criterion for wage fixation is that the real wages of workers should not be allowed to be withered down by price increases. So a rise in the cost of living is sought to be compensated by payment of dearness allowances, basic pay to remain undisturbed. So generally we pay DA with the rise in the price increases. So this cost of living also affect the compensation decision. So this is also one of the external factor. The next come on the union influence on compensation decision. Union as influence as one of the external determinant of compensation. So when we are saying or talking of union, it means the organized labor. So organized labor, also known as industrial labor, and is able to get more compensation as compared to when we talk of unorganized or a craft labor. Workers' union demand for the higher compensation. If they cannot get their demands completed, they resort strike and other methods through which labor supply is restricted. So the presence or absence of labor organizations often determine the quantum of wages paid to the employees. And we can say that employers in non-unionized factories enjoys the freedom to fix wage and salaries as they want. The employee of strongly unionized companies too have sometimes no freedom in wage and salary fixation. They are forced to yield to the pressure of labor representatives in determining and revising pay scales. But yes, it can be said that the presence or absence of labor organization often determine the quantum of wage paid to the employees. Also, to add in this point, the collective bargaining strength of the trade unions, that also influence the wage levels. Trade unions enjoy an upper hand in certain industries, like if we talk of banking industry or the insurance or the transport and other public utilities. Therefore, wage structure in such industries and in such union active regions, salaries and wages need to be fixed and revised in consultation with the unions for ensuring smooth industrial relations. So the next point in the external factors, I'll be discussing on the labor laws. So unions and labor relations laws also influence pay plan design, and various labor legislation and court decision legitimize the labor movement. They gave union legal protection and granted employees the right to organize, to bargain collectively, and to engage in concerted activities for the purpose of collective bargaining or other mutual aid or protection. If we see the history, historically the wage rate has been the main issue in collective bargaining. However, unions also negotiate other pay related issues, including time off with pay, income security, for those in industries with periodic layoffs, cost of living adjustment, and benefit like healthcare, etc. So this labor laws has also empowered employees and the laborers, and that also plays a very vital and important role in compensation decision. Now, the last this factors in globalization and cross-sector mobility, if we discuss on. So how does globalization affects the compensation? It's had basically, changed the pay structure if we generally look into. So it has unsheared in the era of higher compensation level in many sectors of the economy, basically. The entry of MNCs, that multinational corporation and big corporates, have triggered a massive change in the compensation structure basically of the companies across sectors. If we see, there are salary boom basically in the sectors like IT or the hospitality or the biotechnology, and that this is just basically or because of globalization only. So globalization actually has changed the pay structure in some of the sectors. So this is how it impacted the compensation. Now the last point, if we talk about, that is the cross-sector mobility. So what does it mean, that cross-sector mobility? It is about that, moving from one sector to another. Like if an individual working in the hospitality sector, moving from hospitality to BPO, suppose. So thanks, basically, we should thank to the mobility of talent across the sector, which has empowered the contemporary companies to benchmark the salaries of their staff with others. Otherwise they find it difficult to benchmark the salaries of their staff with others in the industry. So this is how the cross-sector mobility has impacted the salary decision or the compensation decision. So these are the few external compensation, um, few external factors of compensation which affects the compensation decision. Now come to the internal determinants of compensation, in which we'll be discussing on the compensation policy of the organization, how it affects, or the job worth, or there are some employees related factors also which affects the compensation. Let us start with the compensation policy of the organization. Before we talk about that, how compensation policy affects, we should also know about that what should be there in a compensation policy and what is basically the compensation policy. So compensation policy is basically a guideline for making compensation decision. The first thing employers should consider when developing compensation package is fairness, and it should be vital and maintain internal and external equity. So that is what uh, is what the organization should consider, or should take in their compensation policy. And the policy should include the company's philosophy related to the major components of incentive compensation, including the strengths and weaknesses of each, and how the overall plan provides optimal alignment of interest with share owners. And the policy should provide broad guidelines by which the company will use alternative forms of compensation and the relative weight in relation to overall compensation, if others form of compensation will be utilized. So an organization often formally or informally establishes compensation policies that determine whether it will be a pay leader or a pay follower or strive for an average position in the labor market. So when we say a pay leaders, they are the organization that pay higher wages and salaries than these competing firms. This helps to retain and attract high quality and productive employees. If we say that the organization policy is the market rate, so they are the average pay. These are the companies, these are the average pay that most employees provide for a similar job in a particular area or industry. It is also known as a going rate policy. And if the policies of pay followers, these are the companies that choose to pay below the market rate because of poor financial condition or a belief that they simply do not require highly capable employees. So it depends on the compensation policy also, that what will be your compensation strategy or compensation program. So this is one of the internal factor which affect compensation decision of the organization. The second is the organizational ability to pay or employers' affordability. So an organization's ability to pay is also an important factor in determining compensation package. The compensation an organization pays to its employee depends on its ability to pay, basically. So companies that have good sales and therefore high profits tends to pay higher wages than those which running at a loss or earning low profits because of the high cost of production or low sales. However, all employers, irrespective of their profit or losses, must pay no less than their competitors to attract and retain potential employees. So that has to be maintained. You have to pay the market rate. You have to pay as your competitors are paying if you want to attract the right talent. So this factor is less important in short run because there is a minimum wage level which a company must pay. In long run, ability of organization to pay can affect the compensation decision. So because in long run, if ability to pay increases, then company can pay higher salary, bonus and other benefits. So this is about the organizational ability to pay or employers' affordability, which affects the compensation decision. And this is one of the determinant, which is a internal factor which affects the compensation decision. Now let us discuss about the worth of a job. Uh, that's very clear by its name, that what is the worth of a job. Accordingly, you will pay. That helps in taking decision of about the compensation for a job. So for this, we use basically the job evaluation technique, because job evaluation helps establish satisfactory wage differentials among jobs. Whereas we have heard about performance appraisal, that is also having a role in compensation decision. Performance appraisal helps award pay increases to employees who show improved performance. So these are the tools which actually decides the compensation, which actually decides about the incentive pay to the employees. So worth of a job, to add a point in this, organization base their pay level on the worth of a job. The wage and salaries tend to be higher for job involving exercise of brain power, responsibility loaded jobs, creativity oriented jobs, and so on. So this worth of a job is a point that's very clear in itself, that it decides about the compensation or the price of a job, right? The next is the employee's worth. Now, when we are talking about employees' worth, in some organization, time rates are granted to all employees irrespective of performance. In such cases, employees are rewarded for their mere physical presence on the job rather than for their performances. However, many private sector organizations follow performance-linked pay system. They conduct performance appraisal more often than not, which provides input for determining pay levels. It distinguishes the higher or high performer from the low performer and non-performer. So there are several employee related factors interact to determine his or her remuneration. These includes performance of an employee, seniority, experience, potential, and sometimes even sheer luck. So performance is always rewarded with a pay increase. Rewarding performance motivates the employees to do better. Management prefers performance to effect pay increases, but unions view seniority as the most objective criterion for pay increases. So there is always a tussle in between the management and the union. Experience makes an employee gain valuable insights and should therefore be rewarded, but should also consider the potential. Otherwise, potential is useless if it is never realized. That's the reason some organizations do pay some individual based on their potential. And that is why young managers nowadays, if you have heard of, that they are paid more because of their potential to perform, even if they are short of experience. Some people have luck to be at the right place at the right time. So these are the factors, these are the employees related factors which actually decides the compensation. So at a glance, if we look off the characteristics of employees influencing remuneration includes the performance, the experience, the seniority, the employee's caliber. When we are talking of performance, this employees who performs more than the standard should be given rewards to motivate them so that good performance is repeated in future. Experience is a person learns a lot through experience. Experience of employees is useful to organization. So it should also be rewarded. If we consider the seniority factor, so seniority is most objective criterion for pay increase. Senior employees should be paid more as compared to juniors. Potential should also be rewarded. Employees caliber, that should also be paid for their that should also be paid, as I already told you. So due to potential, competency, and caliber, young employees are sometimes paid more than the senior and experienced employees. So these are the factors which actually affect the compensation decision of the organization. And the last, we'll be discussing on the business strategy. The overall strategy which a company pursues should determine the remuneration to its employees. Where the strategy of enterprise is to achieve rapid growth, remuneration should be higher than what competitors pay. So it depends on the business strategies of the organization. and where the strategies to maintain and protect current earnings because of the declining fortunes of the company, remuneration level needs to be average or even below average. So this is also an important factor which has a role in the compensation decision. So this is how these are the factors, how it impacts a compensation decision. And at the end, what we can say is that one has to recognize the importance of all these factors. One has to consider all these factors while designing an effective compensation program. And to make an effective compensation program, to make it adequate, equitable, balanced, cost effective, secure, acceptable to the employees. So one has to take into considerations these factors and evaluate the impact of these factors in the pricing decision of the organization. So the employee should understand the pay system and feel it a reasonable system for the enterprise and himself or herself. So for getting such response from the compensation program, one need to look into these factors, impact and affect, and consider its impact while designing the compensation program. So I hope you have understood today that what are the determinants of compensation, what are the factors which affects compensation decision, so the internal and the external. So hope you have enjoyed the lecture. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.